This is your spiritual game plan, and I'm your host, Cheri Fletcher. Change. It happens to all of us. You've invested your time and energy into an important role, sometimes for years. Then suddenly it's time for you to move on. Maybe you've worked hard on a dream, and now your path is taking a new turn, but the dream isn't going with you. Perhaps you've raised your kids, and now they've moved on, but your empty nest is filled with parent care. Maybe you're in the middle of diaper changes and laundry piles. If you find yourself asking questions like, where do I fit in anymore? Am I even relevant? How do I find my purpose now? You are in the right place. This is the show for women in a season of transition. I believe that while your roles in life will change, your purpose is eternal. I'm here to help you understand just how intentionally you were made by a creator with a game plan. Through interviews and inspirational guests, we'll discover ways to help you unlock the purpose God placed in you, develop a game plan for your life's calling, and embrace the intentional masterpiece you were created to be. Today, I will be talking with Amy Carroll. Amy is a speaker and writer for Proverbs 31 Ministries. She's the author of Breaking Up with Perfect and Excel, as well as the director and coach of Next Step Coaching Services. As a woman who loves a great story and a challenging idea, co-hosting the Grit and Great podcast with Sherry Gregory has become one of her favorite things. Have you ever found yourself in a circumstance where you lost out on something you could have gained by listening because you did not hold back your opinion? Today, Amy will share how she learned that when she shares unsolicited opinions, it can actually block God's revelation. She and I will discuss 4 lessons on how to listen and then use your voice with a tender heart. 3, 2, 1. I'd like to welcome Amy Carroll to the podcast today. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, I'm so excited to be with you, Cheri. I always love time with you.
This is awesome. So this is your first time as a guest on my podcast, but we've had a chance to talk together prior, and that is also on YouTube, but that was such a fun time. So we'll have the links up to that so people can see that, but I'm so glad that you have joined me on my new podcast and are going to bless my listeners today. So
I'm excited to be part of it, and I'm so proud of you jumping into this new forum. I love podcasting, and you're doing a great job.
Thank you. It is so much fun. The first jump's scary, but yeah. I've been watching you and Sherry Gregory on Grit and Grace, and you guys are so inspiring. And so you were inspiration for me. So thank you.
Oh, well, we love doing it. And there's something so fun about the interaction. In fact, I've been talking with my son a lot. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I over and over again, I'll say, when I was talking to so-and-so on the podcast or such and such on the podcast, it's such a learning experience. It's so wonderful for those of us that are doing the interviews to learn from other people.
It has been such a blessing. I've loved it even more than I thought I would. And same thing, I'll be in the car and go, oh, that reminds me when I interviewed so-and-so. And yeah. It's great. So it's awesome. And I'm glad to be able to talk to you because I know you're going to really bless my listeners today. So I first met you on Kathy Lip's back porch.
Yes.
Yes. And since then, I've been able to also been coached by you in some of the speaking workshops that I've been to. Such a gifted coach you are. And now I'm glad that I'm able to call you friend because not only am I going to live closer to you, when this airs, I will be living closer to you, but being able to just talk and ask your opinion and stuff on things has been such a blessing. So I appreciate that very much.
Well, thank you.
So
I love our friendship too.
Before we jump in, I want to have you tell my audience a little bit about yourself and your family and how has God led your ministry during this crazy pandemic time?
Well, my family has been in flux. My husband and I have been married over 30 years now, and we were empty nesters, and then we weren't, and now we are again. So this week we became empty nesters again. Our oldest son was on a national Broadway tour, and that, of course, came to a screeching halt with COVID, and so we've had him home for 7 months. And he is actually the one in the family that will sit down and talk with me about ideas and thoughts for 3 hours at a time. So I'm already missing him, but it was bonus time because, you know, Cheri, you have adult sons and daughters, and so you don't expect to get that kind of time with them again when they get in their 20s. So it was great, but very happy to have an empty nest again too.
Yes,
Enjoying that. Yeah. So ministry wise, it's actually been a very slow time, and slow times are hard for me. I don't know how you are. I am actually more productive when I'm busy. So I even sat in my time with the Lord this morning, and I said, here I am, Lord, send me. And so I'm open to whatever God has next. But I think that he may be calling me to a time of sort of rest and reflection. So I chafe at rest, but I'm trying to embrace it.
I hear you. You know, my podcast aired, right? You know, I set it up before COVID, but it came out during COVID. And I have to say, it has been such a blessing because I'm like you, if I hadn't had this to focus on and kind of keep me busy, you know, my writing would have slowed down, my drive would have slowed down. So I hear you on that.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite places to be is in a room with a group of women. So I do speaking, and because I'm an ambivert, but my extrovert side really loves being with people. So I miss that a lot. But one of the things that God has really showed me is that when you have a message on your heart, and even your listeners that aren't writers and speakers, God has probably put something on your heart to share with your neighbor or with other people. There's still wonderful ways to get to share that. And so like what we're doing now, and I did a private Facebook group about one of the passions of my heart, which is racial reconciliation during this time. So it's been an interesting time, hasn't it?
It has been. And yet I have been able to just really see so many great things that God has done through this time. The enemy, you know, wanted it to stop us, and yet we found other avenues and other ways to serve, and ways I probably wouldn't have thought of. So it's had its blessings.
Absolutely. I saw a meme that I loved that says the church has not been closed, it's been deployed. Ooh. And I've tried to take that on, you know, that my ministry hasn't been shut down. It's just been deployed in different ways, and each of us could apply that.
That's great. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to copy that one.
It's a good one.
So I like to ask some fun facts, just, you know, different random things that people can get to know you. And I do have one that I want to ask you, but I'm curious about, you know, you struggling to wait for tax day.
Yes.
And what that even means.
Most people do not anticipate tax day, right? But I do. And it's not because of taxes, though. It's because tax day is the official last freeze day in North Carolina. Wow. And I'm not a great gardener, but I love to garden, and I love to get my fingers in the soil and plant. And so I always am waiting in anticipation for tax day so I can put my flowers in the ground.
Maybe I'll have to learn that when I'm back east. I don't know what it's going to be like to garden in Tennessee, but I can tell you I don't garden. I don't garden. But I'm interested to join you in your new passion of Fiddle Fig.
Oh, yes. Oh, my fiddle leaf fig. So fiddle leaf figs are they're kind of the in plant. I don't know if you can have an in fashion plant, but if you look at HGTV or any decorating magazine, there's a fiddle leaf fig plant. I have such a hard time saying it.
I know.
In every room, every shot you look at almost. Yeah. And so I joined the Fiddle Leaf Fig Growers Club. And listen, there's an actual club. It's on Facebook. It's a private group. And last time when I talked about it on Grit and Grace, there were 29,000 members. That was just a month or two ago. There are now 36,000 members. So
this Fiddle Leaf Fig Facebook private group.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. And all things fiddly figs. And I mean, some of it's serious. You know, what kind of bug is this on my plant? And should I kill it or is it good for it? To one, I had to send it to our friend Cheri Gregory the other day. There was one that posted a picture and her fiddly fig had one leaf left on it.
Totally
And she
me.
had ugly things to say about people who had thriving fiddly figs. So
Totally
there's
me.
bitterness, there's like drama, there's
Oh, well, I'm going to try it, and I'm going to be that girl with the one leaf, and her and I are going to commiserate together on our one leaf fiddly fig.
there you
Yeah,
go. There you go.
yeah,
They're
gotta give her support.
finicky plants. Yes.
That is awesome. So one question that I ask every guest is, looking back in your life, how far back can you see the very purpose that you are living out today and who you have always been?
I mean, from the very beginning, I was the little girl with a hairbrush in her hand. Unfortunately, I can't sing very well. I sing okay. You sing great. But I am not a great singer. I'm a mediocre singer. But now I know that that hairbrush / mic was for my speaking. And I was the little girl with the gift of gab. In fact, getting me to shut up was the problem. And I had bad grades on my report card as a result. But now it's so fun to see how God has taken me through some seasons of silence, but he has used the gift of gab that he wired in me for his glory, I hope.
Yes, absolutely. I love hearing different people's stories on being able to look back, and even some of the things that we do now we got in trouble for, like you at
Yep.
school. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He
But
redeems those things, and
yes,
they often are the centerpieces of our personalities. We just have to learn to let the Holy Spirit temper those things.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Hmm.
So your tagline, I love your tagline, is Tender Hearts, Strong Voices. And you are a speaking coach.
Hmm.
And so what I love is that I actually like the order that you put it in. You didn't tell us that have a strong voice with a tender heart. You're saying that the tender heart has to come first. To me, anyway, that's how I
Hmm.
took it. And so
Absolutely.
how does having the tender heart give us the ability then to have a strong voice, and how do we begin to cultivate that tender heart?
Well, the tender heart coming first guarantees that it's God's expression coming out of our mouths, that it's his heart that's being expressed, his truths, his ways. As I said, I was not only like, I didn't only have a lot of words. I had a lot of very strong words growing up, very, very opinionated, loved to debate you down. I, you know, and I would say I did not have a tender heart at that point. I had strong opinions and a strong voice. But that, as I've matured in my faith and matured as a person, that's not the way I want to lead. Is that years ago, a friend of mine, her name is Ann, she was teaching a Bible study, and she shared something that the Lord spoke to her that I put my name in. She was praying one day, and she felt the Spirit say to her, "Ann, your opinion blocks my revelation." Right, it's like this. As she even shared that, I heard, "Amy, your opinion blocks my revelation."
Mm,
And so it's only when we have a tender heart, first towards God, right, and then towards other people, that we begin to use our voice in godly ways. What I say is that I'm equipping godly women to use their voice in godly ways. When people ask, well, what does it mean? Tender heart, strong voice. And I had a conversation with our friends, Kathy Lip and Cheri Gregory, and they helped me identify this process I had been walking through that I just hadn't put words around yet. And God was teaching me these 4 steps. The first step is to listen to him, to listen to other people's stories. The second one is to feel. Often as Christians, we're in this weird realm with our emotions. We're not quite sure what to do with them. But when I say feel, what I mean is to connect our heart to the heart of God and care about the things that God cares about, and then do something. And as a friend of mine posted one day, this shocking statement, like, posting on something on Facebook is not doing something. So or I'll just use me, my latest social justice post didn't actually shift the world in any way, shape, or form, right? And so we do something, we engage with the pain in the world around us to make it a better place. And then finally, the last step is to speak. But it's those first 3, the listen, feel, and do, that tenderizes our hearts. That kind of, I think Americans, we numb a lot, and we do it all different kinds of ways. And, you know, as Christians, we go, oh, those people that use alcohol and drugs. But my numbing drug of choice can be food at times, you know. And so, or entertainment, television, Facebook. So let's get all up in the Christian realm now of how we numb out instead of engaging with the world around us.
That is awesome. We're going to cover the first one. We'll have to have you back on season 2 to cover they all kind of go together, but we're going to really hone in on listening today, because it's such a needed skill. That I need for myself. So you're gonna teach me today, and our listeners can listen in and watch me learn here.
Well, and I'm still learning, very much in progress.
So, and that's one of the ways that you have blessed me, actually, with your friendship, is I really know that you do listen, but I know you actually hear me. And that has been such a blessing. And to really be able to hear someone takes intentionality. And, you know, sometimes while someone's talking, I'll hear something and it reminds me of a similar situation, and I start thinking of that situation. And that's when I stop really hearing the person talking to me. And then I'm waiting. I'm just kind of standing there waiting for it to be my turn to share. And that is terrible, because when that happens to me, I really feel like, okay, what I just shared wasn't valued. And then I think, well, they don't value me. And so when I do that, when I'm waiting for you to be quiet so I can share this, you know, my similar situation, I really haven't earned the right to speak. I really haven't even earned the right to share with you that situation. So how does one go then from listening and then earning that right to speak?
Well, I love what you said about earning the right to speak, but because I think that is so true. I think we do have to earn the right to speak. And listening is part of the way that we earn that right to speak. And gosh, it's just so hard, especially, you know, for a girl like me that has a lot of words. I mean, really, I could fill our entire time together. I could. I have lots of thoughts, lots of things to say.
What was your nickname? Didn't you?
Oh, I have a nickname. My nickname was Action Amy. It was given to me not as a compliment. But it's related, because I have a hard time listening because I'm always in motion. I'm always doing something. I have a list. I want to check it off. Listening to you takes time. And right? I mean, listening, it takes time and it takes intentionality. And our culture is not so great at either one of those. And so I mean, this is something I've had to work very hard on. And it was funny in preparing for our conversation today and looking back at some things I've written. Your listeners can probably relate if you journal. You know, you go back and you journal, you're like, wow, I thought I had that, and now I'm working on it again. And I feel that way about listening, but we do have to be intentional. And one of the ways that I have tried to hone my listening skills is by kind of weighing the kinds of punctuation in my in my conversation. So do I have more periods, which means that I'm making statements, or do I have more question marks, which means I'm engaging you and asking you questions? So one of the ways that I have really been trying to be intentional is to ask people questions and then just sit back and listen. And, you know, it's, that's been interesting because not a lot of people do that. And I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. I have to do that so that I'm not talking the whole time. But not a lot of people do that. And people respond in really amazing ways if you ask them questions, because people do love to talk about their thoughts and talk about themselves. But we very rarely have people ask us questions, so we get to talk about our thoughts and get to talk about ourselves. So people are honored by that. And so the honoring is part of the earning. And then they start to really open up and tell you things. And so I've had to really ask God to grow my ability to listen. And part of that is to grow my interest in other people and to grow my curiosity about other people and what they think and what they feel and what they do and what they're called to. So, Cheri Gregory, how many times have I said her name? I process life with our friend Cheri because we podcast together. But she says, be curious, not furious, which I love that, especially in today's very divided culture. Yes. Be curious, not furious. So when people start to say things that you don't agree with, that you swap the anger reflex with curiosity. And then my other friend Cindy says, help me get to curious. So if it starts to become kind of there's conflict there in the conversation, she'll say, help me get to curious. How did you come to believe that? Or how did you come to feel that or think that? And both of those, I like having little scripts, you know, that pop in my head at a time that I need them. And both of those have helped me with curiosity, especially in conversations where I'm listening, but I don't agree.
Yeah, that was very good takeaway. Thank you. That was very helpful. And with that, curious, not furious, often I feel like while I'm listening to someone, if I don't agree, I need to respond with truth.
Right. Me too.
Yeah. But I think, okay, if I don't, share my opinion, then they're going to think I agree with them. And then again, when that happens to me, I feel shut down. I feel like, okay, they weren't listening, but listening doesn't always mean that I have to agree. And so you had a situation that you wish you had listened with a tender heart before you responded. And it was a really powerful situation. And so I'd love for you to, share that story and that powerful truth.
Well, on Facebook, and we know listening on Facebook is particularly hard because our emotions get engaged so quickly and we respond so quickly. And that's what happened to me on this particular day. I don't usually post political things, but I posted something that leaned political. And a woman responded to me and basically told me I was a tool of the devil.
Man,
and none of us really like that, being called a tool of the devil. And then she went on to expound and tell me why I was the tool of the devil in this particular situation, that I had sort of been critical of a politician. And so, man, Cheri, I just jumped into action. Now, there were some red flags that I totally ignored. Like my typing was like this, right? So fast and so hard and so staccato, one of those music terms. And my heart was racing and I was even breathing hard. I was so angry. Because even the rest of what she had to say was not good, but being called a tool of the devil is not a nice thing for a Jesus girl. And so, so I've typed back this response, and listen, Cheri, it was smart. And it was sharp, and I proved her wrong. And I was so proud, and I hit, post, and I was so proud until the middle of the night. And I woke up in the middle of the night I think I put in the notes the next morning, but when I think about it, I'm like, no, it was the middle of the night and probably God woke me up. And my heart just sank. And I just thought, I don't want to be that person. She was that person to me, but that doesn't mean that that's how I have to respond. I need to set a different standard for myself as a Jesus girl. Not a tool of the devil. My response might have been that, I don't know. But, and so I did regret that. And I did get up in the middle of the night and take it down. Now, I don't know if she saw it or didn't see it. But I felt repentance, but it was one of those things that I was like, I don't want to repeat this over and over. And this is a process. I had a situation recently that I kind of ended the exchange with a little snarky response. And I was like, I shouldn't have done that. Usually I think of that a day later. I'm proud of it at the time, not so great. But to your point, I was just like you, that I just thought if I listened and I didn't respond to people, that was agreement. And I think we get sold that in the church some, like you have to respond with truth. Well, truth is essential, right? Truth with a capital T, the kind that comes from God, the wisdom that comes from God is essential. But there's a time for that, I think. And this is part of the earning also, is that we've invested time in the relationship. So there's a time for truth, but there's a time just to listen. And what I've realized was listening doesn't equal agreeing. Listening equals love. And in an investment of love builds a relationship, and in turn earns the right to speak at the right time. So we don't even have to respond to everything, And I always thought I had to have a response.
Yeah, I have felt that, like, okay, I have to respond to this, but then I think, is my response going to be, is that, the best thing? And while we were talking, in reference to what you said, we do need to respond in truth, but let's look how Jesus responded. He responded with a question mark. He responded with curiosity.
Yes.
So,
Jesus was the master of the question, wasn't he?
Yes, absolutely. And so you wrote a piece that I really enjoyed called How to Listen If You Don't Want People to Talk.
This is what I've been best at for a long time.
I know. It's a great one, but it's so power-packed. And I'm guilty of this. And I read this, I'm like, ouch, did we have to go there on that one? But, I can ask someone their thoughts on something. And the minute I don't agree with their response, I lose out. I just wish they'd be quiet. I really don't want them to talk. Or worse, sometimes you feel like, okay, I have to ask them, but I'm not sure, if I want to sit here long enough to listen. And, sorry, I'm just kind of sharing a little bit about myself there, but I'm not really listening to them. So you mentioned that you learned that same process, and I've done that with my husband as well, but you learned this when you asked your husband, Barry, his opinion. And from that situation, you learned 4 lessons, and we're going to start talking about those. But let's talk about what you did with Barry and then how these lessons came about.
Well, so there are things that are right and wrong. And then there are things that are not right and wrong. And so one day I was writing a sentence, and I was working on crafting this sentence. And so Barry, it's funny because I'm the author in the family, but Barry's actually the word guy. I mean, he's amazing with words. So I took the sentence to him, and I was already kind of proud of the sentence. Let me just say. And I took it to him and I said, give me some suggestions for this. And then he did. How annoying. But so every suggestion he made, I shot them down one by one. Like, well, that's not the way a woman would say that. Or I don't think that would really resonate with my audience. Or, it was just one thing after another. And he had started off as so engaged with me because he likes that kind of challenge. And then I look at him and he just has this hangdog look. I mean, it was like I had shot him through full of holes, you know, and he wasn't willing to give me any more suggestions at that point. And I just realized that I had asked him to engage with me and then completely shut him down. And as I reflected on that, that's not the only time I've done that, because I've been that, you know, opinionated, kind of mouthy girl. I have to watch that as my default.
I think we've all done that. We've all done that. So one of them then is then listening without preconceptions.
Yeah. So lots of times I find that I will set up a question with an answer that I want in mind, right? And really, in that case with Barry, what I wanted was him to say, oh, what you wrote is fantastic. I just wanted a rubber stamp on it. And so I'm trying to be really careful that when I ask questions that I'm just open, that I'm not leading with that question with preconceptions attached to it. I'm an Enneagram 1. Have you talked about Enneagram on the podcast at all?
Yeah, I'm a 7.
And so are you?
Yeah.
I love 7s, and I wish I was a 7. But anyway, because 1s can be really, you know, that perfectionist. And so for me, one of the things I have to battle all the time is there's one right way. And it's my way, of course.
Of course.
Of course.
Wait, no, it's mine. No.
Oh, yeah, for you. I mean, we'll let you think that. I'm just kidding. No, but I've had to really work on that, because in the case of this sentence, there wasn't a right or a wrong. There wasn't one right way. And we face lots of things like that. And so I'm having to give up my one right way of thinking.
Yeah. And instead of hearing criticism, you need to hear it as curiosity or clarification. And so often I hear it as criticism.
Oh, yes, me too.
Yeah. And so preconceptions are basically relationship limiters.
Well
because
said.
really not getting a two-way opinion here. And they also get in the way of all the possibilities that we could have with what we're doing. And sometimes, you know, I don't ask someone their thoughts because I base it on an assumption that I already know what they're going to say. And so I don't even ask them, but then we both lose because I could have been wrong, you know, maybe. And what they would have said could have blessed me, but also validated that that I think that what they have to say is worth something. And so that, you know, I have to think of that. And so that was lesson 1, preconception. So lesson 2, create space for something new. Everyone wants to feel like they've contributed, you know, being part of the team and that they're contributing. And so, you know, when we're going to talk, you know, again, these lessons are for me. Once I've asked someone for their input, then what do I need to do?
Well, this is the strangest thing for me to say, and I feel like a hypocrite saying it. But we need to choose silence, because here's what I realized with Barry. So for me, my process is I'm not a highly creative person, but I've decided, because I'm made in the image of a creator God, I'm going to stop saying that I'm not a creative person, because we're all creative to some degree. Mine just works differently than some of the highly creative people I know. And so what happens for me is my one good idea, and I'm so happy when I have one good idea, it usually comes at the end of 10 bad ideas. But I didn't let Barry go through that whole process of 10 bad ideas. I just shot them down one after another as if they were the only idea. And so I think a lot of times when we create space, it means that we're silent, that we just don't talk, that we let that other person verbally process. And you know what? Even let's just say that they are wrong in what they're saying. If we give space and create silence on our side, they may come to that conclusion as they talk. Yeah. We might not even have to say anything at all. So we just need to choose silence. The other reason I think silence is so important is it gives space to the introverts in our lives. because for those of us that have lots and lots of words, we tend to want to fill in any silence there is. But introverts and highly sensitive people, HSPs, they actually need that silence in order to feel ready to speak in lots of different ways. So one of my good friends, Melanie, she's an introvert and she's quiet by nature. And I realized in my friendship with her that when I was silent, she would say the most amazing things. But if I didn't leave that space, if I didn't leave that pause or that silence, and I just plowed right through, she was not going to push into that. So I think, it's both of those things. We allow people to verbally process and find the valuable thing, in that process. And then we also leave space for those quieter people in our lives.
Thank you. I need to apply that. I am a 7 extrovert, but I am HSP.
Mm-hmm.
And I need those times of quiet myself.
Mm-hmm.
To process and play things out through my mind. And so keeping that in mind will be helpful for me to realize that other people need that as well.
Well, it's really what you said, that other people, like a relationship should be a two-way street, and other people have valuable things to add into our lives, but we have to give them space to be able to do that.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm pretty sure I have a level of ADD. I think everyone has certain levels of being distracted easily. So I didn't label mine ADD, I labeled mine but first disease. And so
Tell me what that means. I love that.
It means I'll be in the middle of a thought, middle of a project, a middle of a podcast, and I'll think, okay, I got to do this, but first I got to get over here and do this, and then I'm going to edit this, but first I've got to do that. I'm going to clean out this closet, but first I've got to, and I'll have all these open projects going on because I've got to do other things, but first I've got to do other things. And so one thing is that, my focus can be really hard. And so I would love some ideas as I'm listening to somebody to really focus in on what is being said.
This is probably the hardest for me because just like what you said is that I used to look like I was a good listener, but I wasn't listening. I was thinking of the next thing I was going to say. Right. And that's probably for me, the biggest impediment to being a good listener is what's going on inside of my own head. And so this refocusing is something I have to really be aware of. And one of the things for me that really helps reshape any bad habit that I have is to start paying attention to the red flags. And so for me, the red flag in this is when somebody's talking, if I realize I have totally zoned out, I have no idea what the last thing was that they said, and because I'm composing in my own head, I'm doing this, and I thought that's a good symbol for that I'm composing in my own head, then that's a red flag that I'm not really listening. And I have to interrupt my own thoughts. That red flag needs to be like a stop sign, that I interrupt my own thoughts and refocus on that person. And really, these things are habitual. And so we can change the habit of tuning out and thinking our own thoughts, or we can use that red flag as a stop sign to interrupt our own thoughts and to really tune back into that person very intentionally. The word mindfulness is being used in our culture a lot, and it's being used in some weird ways in some places, but I think it's a really good word to think about. This idea when we're listening, we have to be very present. And so if our thoughts are whirling, that we think about the expression on our friend's face, or just pay attention to the body language that they have as we try to tune back into their words and what they're saying too.
I picked up the word present from that, what they're saying, or be present. Made me think of, listening is a present, being able, but what also seeing it as a gift. And so we live in a day and age where I can tell you what I want for my birthday, for my wedding. We've got registries, we've got wish lists. You know, our kids are being trained to send out their Christmas lists to people. And so it makes me think that, you know, this is good, but it's also kind of, it's bad in a way that it really has kind of taken out some of the creativity and some of the, you know, really being able to shop for what I'm thinking of will bless you. And so part of that made me think, in this day and age, that's kind of how we do with listening. We're wanting, we're going to ask you what something we want to hear, or I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to talk to people that are going to give me the feedback I want to hear, because, you know, if I share with you, I'm being pretty vulnerable. And it's kind of like if I were to give you a gift and you kind of opened it, everyone's looking for your face when you open their gift, right? And you open the gift and you're like, yeah, that's good. And you put it aside, you know, you've crushed me. And so the present of listening and the gift of being able to give, I'm not sure, am I thinking metaphor wise, but how is it then that being grateful, like really being able to listen and be grateful for the gift that that person is giving you, how does that help us grow?
You know, even as you were talking about that, Cheri, I had this feeling like, just this feeling of how important it is to allow people to talk and express. And so I think when we ask questions without preconception, giving people space, and that's a gift to them, but they're a gift back to us that is so overwhelming, I think, is transparency, to get a glimpse inside somebody's heart and soul and mind. That's an amazing, overwhelming gift. And it's when we ask questions without those preconceptions, when we ask questions and we listen with love instead of for the next thing that we're going to say, when we do all of that, it builds trust. And trust is a tremendous gift. And again, it goes back to what you said at the beginning. Trust is earned. And so even when we don't agree with what the person is saying, I think we can be grateful and see the gift in the human connection, because there's something about somebody being vulnerable. Brené Brown I just love, you know, all her research that she's done on shame versus vulnerability. And when someone is vulnerable with us, we need to see that as a precious gift. And I have to confess that I am not wired naturally to do this. My mom is a noticer. And she notices, she cares for people so well and stuff. And a lot of times I care, but I might not notice until maybe a day later. I'm kind of a slow processor. But I am trying to learn to hear people, even people I don't agree with, and hear the vulnerability. And usually I'm thinking, Facebook doesn't really do this. You know, this is face-to-face, person-to-person, heart-to-heart stuff that we have to cultivate. That really is a precious gift to get from someone.
Yeah, thank you on that. That's a good concept to think of. And so as we wrap up our time, I did want to kind of veer off the topic just a little bit and share about your book, Exhale. Which I love that title because it just makes me go.
It's an automatic, isn't it?
Yes, all that angst out. But the subtitle really captures the essence of what it takes to be able to listen and apply the lessons that we talked about today. Because you say, love who you, or lose who you're not, love who you are, live your one life well. And there's a statement on the back cover that says, move from running on empty to spent and content. And so as we wrap up, how then does listening, how does that apply to losing who we're not and loving who we are and living our life well, which means we're content in all areas? How does that affect our ability to listen?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is to lose who we're not, because Exhale was a book really written for doers. You can hear that. It's funny because even the idea of spent and content, that doesn't appeal to everybody, but for doers it does. I call it happy tired. It's like it's the tired you are at the end of a day where you have just gotten so much accomplished and you're so happy laying in bed, right? But for doers, listening is really, really hard. And so we have to lose who we're not. What I think of is our minds and our hearts, for the most part, probably look like an episode of Hoarders. We've taken on so many responsibilities and expectations from ourselves and others that weren't ours to begin with. So our minds and hearts are so cluttered, and clutter in our minds and hearts precludes listening. Like, you cannot listen if your heart and mind and schedule are cluttered. And so we have to lose all those things that we're not responsible for, that were the expectations that are not ours to fulfill. All of those things, we have to lose those, because that is what creates the time and space for listening. And then we have to love who we are, because in this, this idea of self-love is controversial in the Christian world. But what Cheri and I talk about in the book is loving who God created us to be. All those things in us. And I think when we are living in God's love, and we see our love of self as an act of worship towards our Creator, not just something self-centered, we're not so upset about people who disagree with us, because we can face them with the security of being loved rather than the insecurity of not being sure of who we are. And when we face people with security, we're just not that upset about the things that we don't agree on. And so when we love who we are, we can be curious about other people without feeling so threatened. And I really believe listening is part of living our one life well. Listening to others and being listened to, both are a gift, and they're just part of a rich, rich life.
Thank you. I am so blessed by all the stuff you said today, and I just needed to hear that, because I just can, as a 7, I can get so excited about things and wanting to share, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm really giving you something by telling you everything. And so I've got to, yeah.
And that is a gift. I mean, it's reciprocal, right?
Right. But, being able to interrupt myself, I hadn't thought of that. And so interrupting myself keeps me from interrupting you. And so that is something I really need to remember. So thank you so much for joining me today. And for those that are listening, all the ways to connect with Amy, and the links will be in the show note. And I just, again, thank you so much for blessing me and my listeners.
Well, it's a tremendous pleasure. Thank you for having me, Cheri.
Thank you for listening to this episode with Amy Carroll. I learned that in order to really listen and hear what someone is sharing, I need to lose whom I'm not, love who I am, and that will allow me to live my one life well. Being and loving who God made me to be allows me to hear what others are saying without preconceived ideas and with a tender heart. All of the links to connect with Amy, listen to her podcast, Grit and Grace, and other resources mentioned in this show are in the notes. If this message blessed you and you know someone who would be blessed, please share it. I'd also be very grateful if you would subscribe so that you don't miss other great guests. And if this is your first time listening to Your Spiritual Game Plan podcast, be sure and go back and listen to the other episodes. Then leave a show rating and an honest review. God has always had a purpose for you in the plans that He made long ago.